We're going to talk about Joe Biden as well, because Eylon Levy is here, former Israeli government spokesman, on the news basically from President Biden that there is a Gaza ceasefire deal on the cards and maybe even on the brink. Let's have a look at what President Biden had to say.
On the war between Israel and Hamas, we're on the brink of a proposal that I laid out in detail months ago, finally coming to fruition. I have learned in many years of public service to never, ever give up.
He's giving up in about 4 days. But that's another story. And let's talk to Eylon Levy, who is, of course, former Israeli government spokesman. Eylon, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. If this is true, obviously, and the hostages get released, it's a great story. It's a great news story. Everyone will be very happy about it. All right-thinking people around the world will be rejoicing. And if it does happen, it will be no thanks to Joe Biden, frankly. It will be thanks to Israel and its very, very robust defence of its own nation and its very robust taking apart of Hamas.
Sure. Mike, look, first of all, let me bring you an update from Israel overnight. Everyone is waking up a little bit more sleep-deprived today because we had another Iranian ballistic missile attack from Yemen overnight. At 3 o'clock in the morning, half of the country jumped out of bed and ran for shelter because the Houthi pirates, the same ones who've been attacking British ships in the Red Sea, fired a ballistic missile at Israel. Everyone had to run for shelter, and one of the pieces of shrapnel hit a house near Jerusalem. You're right, we're waking up today to news that a ceasefire deal could be close, and there are mixed feelings in Israel today. On the one hand, everyone wants to get those hostages out. We know they're being starved and tortured and raped and executed, and their agony has been going on for too long. We want to get them home. But on the other hand, there is fear about a deal that would end up leaving Hamas in power. We want to get the hostages out, but we don't want to leave their kidnappers in power in Gaza. And there is concern among the hostages' families as well that we're talking about a three-part deal that wouldn't get all the hostages out in one go. And they're worried that if you don't get all the hostages out in one go, some of them are going to be stuck there forever. But they're pinning their hopes on President Trump. They're looking at President Trump, who is promising there will be all hell to pay. All hell will break loose if the hostages aren't released. And they say that's the way that you deal with a psychopathy jihadi terrorist group that is still holding hostages, including children. Yeah. You threaten them. You don't ask them nicely. You thump on the table.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I mean, you won't at all be surprised, I dare say, to see that David Lammy, while he was on sort of a patrol yesterday in the Middle East, went to see Mohammed Abbas in Palestine, the Palestinian Authority, still seems to think that UNRWA is the answer to everybody's ills. I mean, it's so disappointing, really, for me personally, as a British citizen, to see our Foreign Secretary mixing with these people.
Yeah, deeply disappointing to see David Lammy's visit to Israel, where he essentially committed more UK terror financing to UNRWA. I mean, there's no other way to put it. UNRWA is a Hamas front. It's a UN agency that employs Hamas terrorists on a massive scale, and he's pledging more UK taxpayer funding to the same school system that produced the October 7th monsters. Israel has been warning that it is infested with terrorism, and the UK is ignoring Israel's warnings. It's ignoring the hostages' families too. Mandy Damari is the mother of the only remaining British hostage, Emily. She's still trapped in Gaza. She was in Britain a few weeks ago. She begged the British government, please lead an international initiative to get humanitarian aid to the hostages. Keep them alive till we can get them out. And stop voting at the United Nations for an unconditional ceasefire that means not conditional on the release of Emily and the other hostages. Yeah. And the UK just ignored her. It hasn't put any pressure to get humanitarian aid to the hostages. It went back to the General Assembly and voted for an unconditional ceasefire that would abandon the hostages. And the families are expecting the UK to use its leverage and its pressure as an ally on Hamas's patrons, Qatar, Turkey, Iran. Stop playing nice. These are countries that are backing a terrorist group that is holding a British hostage, and we need British power brought to bear against these countries to force Hamas to let them go now.
It's absolutely shocking. Eylon, thank you very much indeed. Eylon Levy there with some pretty harsh words for David Lammy, who's been out in the Middle East over the last couple of days. Still, as you heard there, Peter, not convinced that UNRWA is a terrorist front, not convinced that UNRWA is in fact part of the problem in the Middle East as opposed to part of the solution. A meeting with Mohammed Abbas, who's from the Palestinian Authority, who is meant to be the sort of moderate voice of Palestine, but has yet to condemn what Hamas is doing.
I don't know how much clearer the evidence of UNRWA's highly suspicious, I'm being polite, highly suspicious behaviour around all of this needs to be before the British government go, are we actually going to question this now?
Right.
Are we going to hold them to account?
Well,
are we going to ask very difficult questions?
Right. Well, this is a government that released money to UNRWA after it was stopped by Rishi Sunak's government, because Rishi Sunak's government understood that UNRWA had not only helped to create what happened on October the 7th of 2023, but they actually had active members of UNRWA taking part in the massacre. I mean, what more information do you need than that?
Yeah, exactly. And it's really, frankly, quite appalling. Of course, this time next week, as we mentioned earlier, Donald Trump will be the President of the United States of America.
Yes.
And Hamas, you better pay attention to that, because I'm sure that one of the first things Donald Trump is going to want to do is improve the situation in the Middle East for the majority of people. When I say that, majority of Israelis, most definitely. I'm sure he's going to be a staunch ally of that nation, which certain people want to wipe off the face of the earth. And I'm sure he's going to be an enemy of terrorists. So they better watch out.
Well, I mean, as we just heard from Eylon Levy there, you know, overnight, which David Lammy doesn't seem to have commented on, they've been under attack again from some Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen, firing missiles into Israel.
A ballistic missile.
That's the nightly and daily fight that they've got on their hands.
The reality that Israelis living in Israel have to face every day.
Every day.
And let's remember, Israel is a secular society as well. There are many people of other faiths that live happily in that country, side by side with Jews, with the Israelis, making a living, contributing to that nation. So it's not exclusively a nation occupied merely by Jewish people.
No.
And yet their uncomfortable reality is being bombed and facing hostility from terrorist organisations who simply want to wipe them from the face of the earth because of the faith they follow.
I know. Shocking, isn't it?